everybody. We are back with another High Fives athlete. Adam and I are with Mods for Quads. I'm Susan Leedy. This is Adam Lavender. And we're interviewing Tony Schmiesing today, right? From Berkeley, California. And Tony, are you tetraplegic or paraplegic?
Tetraplegic.
Okay. All right. So I have this.
Level C4-5.
Okay. Got ya. I have these questions that I'm going to ask you. And the first one is, please briefly describe your injury and the day it happened.
So it was a summer day and I was at a water polo workout at the beach near my house in Newport Beach. And we would do that from time to time, not get in the pool, but we would go to the beach and do run, swim runs or, various other activities in the sand. And that particular day, I was a lifeguard down there as well. And that particular day, instead of swimming around one of the rock jetties, I decided to run out. A few of my teammates and I decided to run out and then just bypass the whole initial swim and dive in off the end. And I dove in and I hit a rock underwater. The thing was, it was something I'd done many times, when the waves were big, and I was a surfer as well. That was kind of how you get out. But also I knew that, I knew better, but I just was so confident down there that, they just misread the situation. And yeah, but when I was in the air, I realized that was what happened. Yeah.
You realized it when you were in the air because you saw
I did, because I dove and the tide or the wave must have pulled back and I could see the rock underwater. It was shallow. Yeah. Because they kind of they're stacked and they go out, they're finger jetties. So, they're kind of in a pyramid, where the tip is above the water.
So that's a bummer. You've done that how many times before?
I had done it so many times. I used to cliff dive down there. It couldn't have been a more, look, it was dangerous for sure, but it wasn't something I was unfamiliar with in terms of the terrain. And I would like to say it's a fluke, but it was also not super smart either. But I would have never in a million years thought that would be the way I would hurt myself.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Well, what happened after that? Where did you sink?
So I came to consciousness underwater, and strangely, I didn't panic. I think I knew what had happened, that I had a spinal cord injury, because as a lifeguard, you sort of prepared for rescuing people there all the time. So while I never knew anybody who had been paralyzed, I knew the drill, and I kind of intuitively knew. So I didn't panic. I just held my breath and knew that I would float to the top. I don't know, what my orientation was, because for me, I was underwater, but I wasn't swimming. So when I was able to get a breath, I took a breath and I saw my friend, climbing off the rocks. He saw me and I shouted, but at that time my breathing had shifted from my intercostals to my diaphragm, which was very strange. That was one of the things I noticed, that something was weird, in the way that I was breathing. I just didn't know what was going on. And I was shouting, but it was at the beach and he didn't hear me. He thought I was fooling around because I was kind of a joker too. So he thought I was just goofing around, and thankfully he realized that I wasn't, and he came in and he got me. And so when he was pulling me in to the beach, I just told him, try to stabilize my neck. And they got me to the water line, and where they should have left me to prevent the least amount of injury. But they didn't know, they were high school kids as well. And so when the waves were starting to come up around me, they pulled me back up onto the dry sand, which, there's no way to know, but that's where you can sustain more injury.
So you jumped off, knew you were going to hit the rock, started screaming while you're in the air before you hit it.
No, I didn't scream while I was in the air, and I didn't realize that I had seen the rocks till later. I didn't really remember ever jumping off the rock until like a month later.
Oh my
So
God.
I mean, I had a hole almost through my hand from hitting a barnacle, so that broke most of my head, and it was the way that my head hit the rock and bent because I didn't have. I mean, I had a scratch on my head, nothing significant, but like I said, my hands were torn to shreds.
Hmm. How old were
So,
you when this
so
happened? How long ago?
I was 16, just about to turn 17.
So you were super young.
I was a kid, yeah.
How long ago was that?
That was 40 years ago.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So
So we
and
have a lot of wisdom here today.
I do. I've learned a lot over the years. I have. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So you went to the hospital and then you were told that.
Yeah. So when I was on the beach, they called the paramedics. Paramedics came and they sort of did the normal drill. They talked to me, and I remember specifically telling them to call my captain because I wouldn't be in work that day, giving him the number and everything. And when they got me in the ambulance, they drove me while I was in the paramedic truck. I kind of wanted the sirens on just because it seemed more interesting, but they weren't like, no, you're stable, so we don't need to do it. They drove me there, and um, my folks had just gone on a trip, so it was just my sister and myself and a friend staying in our place, and they had left, I think, earlier that morning to go to Yellowstone from California. So they were on the highway somewhere, and I just remember seeing the lights, and the first thing I really remember them doing was screwing in, not giving me anything like in terms of pain reliever because I hadn't really felt pain yet. I think it was just in shock. But I remember them screwing in the bolts that they would do the traction on. That was the first thing they did, and that it was kind of a surreal moment.
Yeah. So the first thing you were worried about was that you wouldn't be at work the next day.
Yeah, that was the strangest thing. They were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we'll give them a call," and I don't think anybody called anybody, but
Oh
that
my
was the
gosh.
thing. That and my friend was covered with blood, and but he said he held up my hand, and it was my hand that was bleeding. So
So
that was
did
kind of.
you stitch up your hand and everything too?
Yeah, they didn't for another couple days. They just bandaged it, and then one of the nurses, I don't know, the timeline's so weird. It could have been 12 hours later, but in intensive care, somebody said, "Oh, you have quite a wound on your hand." So
And then when the doctor came to talk to you and tell you what the prognosis was, how did that all go?
so I remember him standing over, and the thing I remember most was him saying I wouldn't walk again. And for me at the time, I'd recovered from other injuries. That that didn't penetrate. I just was like, yeah, I am. But at that time, I couldn't move anything. I was totally paralyzed. I couldn't move my shoulders. I couldn't move anything. So I mean, I was completely paralyzed for a couple months, I think. Um, Slowly but surely getting like a little bit of movement here, a little bit of movement there.
Yeah.
Um, but I just remember this part of me that was like, it was like he was talking, and he could have been talking about anything. It wouldn't have mattered what he said. And my mind was already like, okay, well, as an athlete, I'm just going to have to work really hard. I got to do what I've always done to recover from any injury. So it, and maybe that's normal. I just didn't feel like accepting whatever it was, that he had to say. And in retrospect, I think looking back on it, having that attitude was really important. I mean, there is a sense of denial, but you know, there would be no way to know what my life was going to be in the next 6 months or a year from then, even if they had told me. I mean, it was like being on another planet surrounded by other people and other circumstances. There was
Mhm.
just nothing about the situation that felt familiar other than I had been in hospitals before with injuries, but you know, this was different. I couldn't even move. I mean, it was a very weird thing. So, and nobody prepared me for it. And like I said, even though I was a lifeguard and I knew about this stuff, I didn't know about the stuff. You know what I mean? You were trained. I never had to rescue anybody with an injury, but you were trained to do it. And but beyond that, you get them to where the paramedics can take over, and then they're on their way. And it's, you know, very rare that you would come across anybody with spinal cord injury.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that we really want to try to accomplish with Mods for Quads is, you know, the high fives athletes are kind of a unique, I mean, I don't know necessarily unique, but
Yeah,
one of the things we keep hearing is you kind of don't really listen to what you're being told. You're like, yeah, whatever, I've got this, you know, and we've been banged up before. We're just going to get
yeah,
up and keep moving forward. And so, um, with all of the progress that's being made with neuroplasticity and people that have recovered and to just be
yeah,
told that and not really know, like, well, what happens if you try? What happens if
right,
you
yeah,
try to come back? You know,
yeah,
what's possible? And so that's really encouraging that you, as a kid, it's like an innateness almost. You're like, yeah,
yeah.
no.
Well, I mean, I just think that it was part of, you know, I was a skater and a competitive surfer and skier, and I think, you know, that you're always taking a spill. You're always trying something new and not succeeding at it. And you know, but you do eventually. And I think that would be part of the DNA. I mean, that might be the commonality between a lot of the athletes in the program, is that you're not unfamiliar with the kind of, it's failure isn't the word, but if you're going to try something difficult or do anything difficult, usually you don't get it right away. And so I think it's the individuals who, just whether they're trying to perfect a trick or do anything, or even just become the best at what they do, whatever that looks like in whatever respective thing that they're doing, it comes with trying. You know, you're just doing it over and over and over. And so I think that's, for me personally, I was so fortunate to have that part of my, that internal fortitude. I think was just really very fortunate. That doesn't mean that there weren't times where there was struggle, because there were. It was arguably one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through in my life,
Yeah.
and especially at that young age, you know. um
Yeah, that's really young. So
yeah.
tell us, what, you know, what are some of the biggest challenges or setbacks that you've had in your recovery and figured out how to overcome?
I mean, for me, I would, there is probably, there's been two along the way, but those are biggies. But I think initially, you know, just the challenges, for me, I was in the rehab hospital for a year,
Really?
almost a year, probably in hospitalization total for a year. So 3 months in standard hospital and 8 months in a rehab hospital. So at the time, I was also doing school because I wanted to graduate with my class.
Mm.
Um, and I think for me, the biggest challenge, there were two challenges at that time. One, not recovering in the way that I wanted to recover and fast enough. I guess that's part of it, you know. Seeing my friends go on and doing the things that they were doing, um, whether it was, you know, going to prom, or whether it was, you know, competing again and doing the activities that I love to do. Um, there was that, but also I think there was a frustrating part, was seeing what paraplegics were able to do. You know, they're playing basketball, tennis, skiing, and I'm here this quad, like a pretty high level quad. And I'm like, God, man, these guys got all the cool shit. They could do all this fun stuff. And I'm, and I'm going, I'm just trying to learn how to push a wheelchair. I think that was a big challenge for me to get over that part. And so to figure out how to shape my life with my particular situation. Later in life, the biggest challenge I had was um, I left my home and went away to go to school at Cal here in Berkeley as an undergrad, and that was a big challenge. Leaving the nest, so to speak, and living on my own and learning how to do that, learning how to navigate all the financial aspects, going to school, getting funds together, doing balancing, finding the personal care attendants I needed for all the times I needed them, in between going to class. And Cal had a unique program at the time, which I can detail later if you want. But that was a big challenge. But for me personally, the biggest challenge I had was towards the end of my senior year. I started to develop pressure sores. I'm really pretty thin, and it brought my life to like literally a grinding halt. It was on my left ischial, and I was, I was making it was making so much progress in doing so much fun stuff and staying out till 2 a.m. and doing all this fun stuff. And now suddenly I've got this sore that it just wasn't getting better. It didn't matter what I did. The seating I had wasn't helping it. So I was in bed so much, just trying to recover it, because I didn't want to go to a hospital and have surgery on it. So I would be very cautious about making sure it was healed. But then I'd get up on it and it gets so red and irritated to the point of breaking open, and I'd have to get off of it. So I was spending almost as much time as I was in bed as I was up. And that was a really, really, really difficult time, because I had done all this stuff. I'd gone to school. I'd been getting ready to graduate. I'd been living a life that was super rich and rewarding and doing all this fun stuff and going to school and up all the time. And then now suddenly I'm down, and it was a tough moment for me. And this problem persisted it persisted up till about 12 years ago, where my life was 3 days I could be up for half a day, 4 days I'd have to be in bed recovering. And I was working with so many rehab specialists to try to solve this problem. Part of it could have been postural, that just occurred over the years. When I first broke my neck, one of the things they put you in are sling seats. Everything was a sling seat, and I was about 5'6" when I broke my neck, and I'm 6'2" now, so I grew a lot, and so that probably affected my posture. Yeah, so
that's really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, it's conjecture, of course, that played some role in just having that slight curvature in my spine, but more pressure on my left ischial. But yeah.
I was just going to ask you, have you found a solution to this at this
point? Yes. So so for years I worked with Rojo specifically, and finally they gave up because they couldn't solve my problem. I was working with their direct people because they were like, okay, if we could solve this problem, we could solve basically anybody's skin problem. And then I was working with people at Stanford with sort of modified seats, and we could get things a little bit better, but never where I was able to be up and to do the things I wanted to do. Until finally, I had wanted to ski again, and my girlfriend at the time found out that, there's this program up in Alpine, which is up in Tahoe. And so I did that, and I had a great time, but I realized that if I were going to continue with it, I needed to figure out, like, my imagination and my dreams were so informed by my youth and what I wanted to do and the things that I wanted to do, that suddenly I realized when I was skiing, I go, oh my God, there's so much potential here for me to do some things that I haven't been able to do all this time. Like stuff that in my wildest imagination, I couldn't have imagined doing, because there just wasn't the stuff lined up to do it. And here was something that was almost totally lined up equipment wise to do it. So I remember thinking, okay, but the first thing I got to do is I got to get my own ski, and I got to mod the seat, because seating for me is super important. Like I said, it's,
Yeah.
I would go up to the mountains. I'd have to stay down a day, because the drive up, I would drive it with the Rojo, and the Rojo would inflate as it went to altitude. So it was a big mess. But I realized, okay, but if I want to stay on the mountain, I'm going to have to have some sort of special seat. So I was looking up something, and I found a company in Colorado called Aspen Seating and Ride Designs.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, they were pretty small. And I met the guy who started it, Joe Bieganek, and I talked to him, and then High Fives stepped in and helped me pay for the initial seating. And it was so transformative. I could sit in that ski all day, and I was going, well, wait a minute. Like, I should just sit in my ski all day when I'm in town. But of course, that's ridiculous. But I realized, I go, well, why don't I get one of these for my chair? And I talked to Joe, and we've become friends over the years. And he goes, yeah, you came at it backwards. Most people come at it for the sort of the seating part of it, and then they go, oh man, I can put this on my ski. And that, I mean, aside from breaking my neck, there has been nothing else in my life that has been as transformative and as miraculous. And it's really nothing short of a miracle, this seating system. And what Joe is doing, the company, it's so outside of the box and shifting paradigm in terms of what seating is, that insurance companies weren't paying for, because it doesn't seem like the model should work, but it does. And I've been able to be up in my chair without even having to do pressure relief all day long as I want, for the last 12 years. It's incredible.
So you suffered with wounds for how long?
I would say from probably age 23 to about 40.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but but here's the thing, like, it's there's so much. These are like, talking about these things in this way is really missing the bigger picture, because it's talking about circumstantial things that are contextual, but they don't really paint the more spiritual, emotional, and psychological component that comes along with all of that, because that's what will, for me personally, that's so necessary to overcome setback.
Yeah.
So for me, like, there was a point that I reached. I realized that I wanted. There was a lot of time where I waited around thinking, like, oh, I'm not going to do these things that I want to do until they're like I imagine them, meaning that I wasn't in bed anymore. And then I realized finally, well, my paradigm and my parameters, they are what they are right now. The way my life is set is that I am in bed 4 days a week, and I am up 3 days a week. So whatever it is I want to do with my life, or whatever it is I want to do in terms of having experiences, well, that's just my parameters. They're no different than, not being able to walk up a set of stairs. They're just different parameters. So I realized I had wanted to go to Hawaii and go to Pipeline and stay there and watch people surf at a break it's like Mecca for surfers. And I wanted to be there and experience that place. And I had never gone, because I always wanted to do it when I could be up every day. But in my mind, I went, oh, wait a minute. Well, I could either be in Berkeley in bed, or I could be on the North Shore of Oahu in front of Pipeline in bed. Well, either way, I'm in bed. So, like, my parameters of this, I'd rather be in bed on the North Shore of Oahu.
And still get a day in.
Yeah, but beyond that, is just sort of accepting the parameters of what they are and working with those, and that was super important. you know. And then, but look, I'd be lying if I didn't say that this is way better. I like to be able to do whatever I want when I want to be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I've also had other things come along, which I do want to talk about because I think it's important for people who've had spinal cord injuries
Well,
that want to get their stuff back.
we might have to have you as one of our like classes or courses that we do, having the length of experience that you do. Because I
Yeah,
mean, one of the reasons we want to put this whole organization together is it it seems like there's a lot of mentor type programs popping up and things, but we want everybody to be able to capture this as a whole so that I have it indexed somewhere so I can go look it up and be like, this guy has been dealing mentally, spiritually, physically, relationship wise for 40
yeah,
years. Like, you're such an amazing healer to be offering to
yeah,
people. It's hard to hit them up one on one, and when you could be exposing yourself to
yeah,
thousands, you know.
yeah.
Um,
No, I mean that's true. I mean, so much of what I learned living on my own, living independently, I learned from other crips, and that was really important because like they're not things that you're taught in rehab hospitals. You only learn them by experience,
mhm.
and it's better to not have to go through tough experiences if somebody else has already done it and they can go, hey, do this, and you can avoid that,
Yeah,
or just how do you live independently as a high quadriplegic? How do you do that? How do you live somewhere in a completely different location? How do you navigate that
yeah.
financially and everything else?
And it seems like there's a lot of support out there on Facebook groups and stuff like that, but nowhere where you can like really index it and be like, oh, I want to search for this,
Sure.
unless
Yeah. I
we're
mean,
missing out on resources that we need to know about. And that's kind of
yeah.
what we're wanting to accomplish.
Yeah. But
Um,
another one of my setbacks, which I should mention because I think it's super applicable to people who are with spinal cord injuries, whether they're paras or quads, is that I ended up getting about in 2007. I started noticing that I was an incomplete quad, so I had sensation and everything. I started noticing sensation loss, and this was pretty. At first, I didn't know if it was from I noticed it first in my legs and my feet and in the groin area, and then I started noticing that like my arms were getting a little bit weaker, and I went to have it checked out. There was a misdiagnosis at first. Then second, we turned out that I had something called syringomyelia, which is essentially the best sort of analog would be if you imagine one of those long animal balloons.
mhm.
Um, it's filled with cerebral spinal fluid inside the middle of your spinal cord. So as that grows, it expands into the surrounding spinal cord tissue and crushes that cord. So it's essentially just killing the neurons because you're losing blood flow. It's sort of like in the way a tourniquet would work. And I didn't know anything about this. Nobody ever told me that this was something that could happen or would happen later on in life. And I ended up losing all the sensation below my level of injury that I had before that day. And I had one surgery that was unsuccessful and another surgery in 2016 that has helped. It stopped the thing because it would eventually kill me. Basically, the balloon went from the base of my tailbone all the way up to my level of injury. So at
Oh,
some point, it would go beyond that and into my brainstem because your body is making this stuff all the time. It coats all
yeah.
nerves everywhere.
So the surgery stopped it, or do you still have to worry about
Yeah.
it?
So every year I have to go get an MRI to make sure that it hasn't come back because in my mind, someday they're going to look at it kind of like in the way that they used to cut people and bleed them out, when they got the flu. They have a silicon tube that runs down my spinal cord and it basically drains that spinal fluid into an area around my abdomen. And so I have this long hose essentially that has little holes in it that can drain that out. But, you know, we have proteins and all other things in these fluids, and eventually it'll clog up and stop working. But this was not something I had ever been told about. There was a potential. Had I known that that would have happened, I would have been able to deal with it sooner. I would have known,
Yeah.
oh wow, these signs aren't normal. This is actually, I mean, it's rare, it's not common, but according to the doctor and Craig, I mean, they were saying that it's it can happen when somebody has whiplash in a car. They don't even have to be paralyzed. It's a
Really?
common enough thing. Yeah.
So I wonder how many people have died from that.
Well, I mean, there's been several people who've died from it that have been famous, but a friend of mine who's also a quad, she has a minor one now. It may never get to the size of what mine was, but it's something that I think would be useful for people who have had spinal cord injuries to know, because oftentimes what happens at our level of injury, we get something called a tethered cord. The cord sort of adheres itself to the back of the vertebrae.
You just
Over
gave me
time.
a really good idea that we could put on the website is like, really important things to keep an eye out on. Like just make a big
Yeah.
list.
Yeah,
And
because when it first started happening, I made the mistake of going to my physiologist, and I I thought, oh well, they took an MRI of my pelvis region and stuff. Well, what should have been done at the time, and after this kept progressing, I should have had a whole complete spine scan, and that didn't happen until I went to a neurologist. But I mean, I don't know if I'm different than anybody else, but I don't like going to hospitals. I don't like doctors. I try to stay away at all costs, So,
yeah,
um, but I think that when it comes to your neurology, anything that seems amiss, I mean, and look, I mean, yeah, I'm a high quad, but I liked having whatever little sensation I had.
well,
I
sure.
liked having whatever little movement I had. Like losing that little bit feels like a lot. It feels like maybe more than even the initial paralysis, because you're like,
Does
come
it
on.
come back at all? Did you gain?
I mean, well, you're going to get back whatever was most recently lost, conceivably. But no, I didn't get anything back that I had lost years in the past. Unfortunately, that is the way it is.
And do you
Shift the nature
continue,
of the spinal
even though
cord.
you continue to try, right? Do you continue to try?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, there was so much time spent where the blood flow didn't get to that area, so that it basically killed those neurons. Now, look, something could come along. There's something that may or may not come along that would change that, but it's not there yet. So,
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next question. That's really good information.
sure.
What tools or strengths from before your injury have you relied on throughout your recovery?
I mean, I think I alluded to it, before, is just having that sort of athletic mindset, that in good family and friends support. I mean, I don't know what my life would look like without that. But positivity, certainly. I mean, I was a positive person, and
Did you
yeah, but
feel like that you lost a lot of friends being in high school and
I didn't lose any friends. But what happened for me specifically, the it's strange, but because the water polo and the swimming, that was so demanding in terms of time. Those friends kind of were always there in the back. When I broke my neck, they weren't there as much as my surfer friends who I competed with, and who I just had. They were there with me every day, came out to the hospital, and they've been lifelong friends. And it isn't to say I'm not friends with the folks from that I play water polo with, because I am. Just the bond at that time, I felt like I sort of lost that bond that I had with those people in the way that I had with them when I broke my neck, because their lives didn't stop. It kept moving on.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, the people that were my surfer friends and skater friends were still with me the whole time.
Well, that's a
Great,
very
I'm grateful for
fortunate.
them. They're an amazing, amazing group of friends.
So what's your life like now? Are you married? Do you work? Do you?
No, I'm a graphic designer and I live in Berkeley and have a good life, have amazing friends. It's been an epic ride. I mean, my life probably looks like a lot of people's life right now with the pandemic, but
Yeah.
I'm a little trickier being an independent quad when there's lockdown orders. It's been sketch for sure. I've been very fortunate to have two good friends who are my personal care attendants who have been with me this whole time, and others have dropped off or got sick, or so where normally I would have 5 or 6 people working for me, I have two right now, and I am forever indebted to their commitment because it's tough for everybody all over, but disabled folk who are trying to live independently in a lockdown state with a particular bug that if I get it, I don't have any coughing abilities. So where it might not be as problematic for some people, the common flu or cold can turn into pneumonia for me. So
Yeah, I'm just so
yeah,
I'm just always overwhelmed with how close you guys are to getting extremely sick so easily with bacteria or sores
yeah,
or virus, whatever. And so
yeah,
I've gained a huge appreciation
yeah. I
for
just had to
understanding
deal with a really bad bladder infection that
that. Hmm.
I had to go to the emergency room, and I'm not vaccinated yet here in California. So
Yeah.
I yeah, it's not fun for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I'm so glad you have such a full life and that, I mean, you've
Yeah,
just been rolling along literally for 40 years.
yeah,
That's really amazing,
it is. Yeah,
the life expectancy isn't, as long usually as an able-bodied
it
person.
is. There's a bit of accelerated decrepitude, but I mean, I would say, since high fives, meeting those cats, and a good friend of mine up there who I ski with, I've had the last 16 years have been incredible. I mean,
Hmm.
I've done amazing things ski wise that I would have never dreamed of that couldn't have happened any other time than they did because things like super pipes lined up, things like skis for bi skis for somebody like myself. The technology came. Yeah, I wish it was around 20 years ago, but it wasn't. And so it just is like feeling like the stars aligned. And so I've been able to, this second part of my journey in many ways, even post the surgeries and searings have been incredibly rich and like, yeah, I mean, I'm making up for all the lost time basically. I don't know, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I feel like the high fives athletes, man, if anybody wants to engineer a better sit ski, like we should all rally around
Yeah,
you guys and
yeah,
get your opinion.
yeah.
And
No, it's pretty. I felt very fortunate. And
we're
then
wanting to have hopefully an event here in Colorado at Snowmass for y'all, but that's, I mean, it's just one thing that's one of our dreams in the future.
yeah, yeah. I skied there before my accident a few times.
Really. So I want to ask you one more question. This is kind of off topic, but
Sure.
or not really, but is there any more advice you could give people in your position with kind of really creative ways you figured out to do something that's benefited you? It could be as little as, a better way to brush your teeth or
I mean, as a quad living independently, there's so many things. Like singling out one would be really difficult. I mean,
and,
so
and just let me preface by saying this. If we were able to get this type of material out to people that are newly injured, it's
yeah.
like for the newly injured, what was one thing that would have been so incredible for you to know rather than figure it out way down the road?
Well, I mean, I think the seating thing is critical. It's so because so early on you're dealing with just the paralysis part of it. that you don't really think of your, I mean, yeah, you got occupational therapy in there. Yeah. And I don't know what it's like now to be in rehab. So I don't know where things are in terms of what they're doing initially, but I can tell you from my experience is that there's stuff that's just left for you to figure out. You know, you get put in the chair, you get put in, you don't know anything about chairs, you don't know anything about the seating, you don't know how things are going to change over time. Obviously that affected me greatly. um, and and I think a lot of the more serious problems can be averted. Those are the kind of things that I wish I knew. um, Everything else is more in terms of living that sort of balancing act of the financial problem of having to have attendance, pay for attendance. And in the Bay, that's tough when you're competing against the very high wage market. And so how do you do that when your baseline, even just with medical stuff, is so high? And
Mhm.
then make rent and then buy food and then do stuff that's fun.
Yeah.
Um, but those are more, that gets into some minutia that isn't really suitable for this. But I would say that being able to learn that stuff, like I said, when I came here to Cal, having people who had already done it and knew stuff, I think that's the benefit of having peers, or maybe something like this, even, in fact, that when you can you can get down to a one-on-one, because there's areas where you wouldn't necessarily want to publish them, but you want them known, and that comes on a one-on-one, because there's lots of ways in which people have to live, that are tricky. Yeah, that's about the best way I could put it.
Well, see, I just feel like that would be so helpful to have like a little, here's a course on dealing with finances as,
Yeah,
an SCI, and here's simple steps.
and
Course one.
it will look different state to state, of course. California, Colorado, and California have a lot of similarities in terms of
Mhm.
stuff with disabilities, but other states don't. The resources are going to look different from state to state. But it would be nice that whatever state you're in, you'd be able to know where to access that stuff.
Yeah, I saw a guy online that specializes in that.
Yeah, there
Um,
are people that do that. I have a friend who does it. Yeah, especially when around work and stuff.
would love to have those resources. So you've been financially supporting yourself all of this time.
Yeah, but I mean, I couldn't do it without the IHSS program here in California, which covers my attendant care. Like, I couldn't do it without healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Those are basic needs,
Mm-hmm.
that's just the baseline stuff. Like, that's the
Yeah.
stuff that if you started at zero, you already have somewhere, depending on your level of injury, you could have somewhere already near $50,000 a year that you have to pay out in medical and attending costs, because those two are together as far as I'm concerned. If you don't have somebody helping you do it for free.
Do you
But if
feel
they're
like
doing it for free, they're giving up their time.
do you think that people are actually passing away because they don't have that ability?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. I just look at the pandemic, and I look at the how slowly, just here in California, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole, but just the inability for these agencies to pivot and adjust on the fly. Like, because, for example, just this is getting into the weeds, but they cap hours in which your attendants can work. So if you have 6 attendants, not a problem, right? Because the hours are going to be split apart. But if you have two, like in a pandemic, which is what's happened to me and other friends, where they have like 2 or 3 people who have been there, or even one, they cap those hours at 40 hours a week. Well, if you're a high quadriplegic, you need to do that. But what happens is they penalize the people who work overtime. Not, they don't penalize, well, they indirectly would penalize me, but they would give a warning saying, well, you can't work this next week, or you can't work that next month. And then your final warning would be you can't work for a year, or even worse, you get taken out of the program altogether. And so that obviously hurts both parties. There should have been a way to say, hey, these overtime hours are no longer in effect, because obviously if you're being kept out of hospitals, which right now are being stretched with other problems, which is great. I mean, having somebody there to keep you out of a hospital or keep you living independently, that's awesome. That's incredible, and that should be supported. Because it's just an arbitrary cap on the hours. I get why they do it, but it's during a time like this that would be really important.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I mean, it doesn't mean that I haven't advocated for it, and friends advocate, and we do. Disabled people have had to scream and shout for all sorts of things, so that isn't surprising. None of this is surprising. It's
No,
a
but
little
it's,
frustrating is all,
yeah.
because you
Well,
still have to work within it no matter what, whether it's there or not there. You have to
mhm.
figure out a way to make it work, and sometimes you have to go, well, I'm going to hope that somebody somewhere is going to be sympathetic when we've broken the rules under the circumstances that are special, meaning that somebody had to work more than their 40 hours a week because they kept me out of a hospital. So
It just seems ridiculous. It seems like there should be a bigger force that's representing you all. You know what I mean?
it
But
is. I mean, but
we're gonna get there.
it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. It's a tough group to have mobilize and have the political voice. There's not much money
Mhm.
behind it, and that's unfortunately in politics that
No, you need to figure that out.
way. I know.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
I don't, we didn't have Adam share, but Adam uses that same seat that you do. And
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
well, thank you so very much.